Hi, thanks for the opportunity to join you all here today, and quickly glancing a lot of familiar and friendly faces. Where's Mike? I owe you a phone call. Okay, I feel bad about that. I'll get back to that. Yeah, I thought I'd start off this morning by describing where I work. Simply put, I work in a building where engineers are outnumbered by lawyers, and where policymakers are convinced that the laws of physics are subject to negotiation or waiver. And you all wonder sometimes. So as I look out over this group, whether you're government or industry, military or civilian, defense or commercial, whether you're competitors or co-workers, whether you work inside the Beltway or on the waterfront, I'm here to remind you that before you were any of these things, you were an engineer. And what brings you here today, what binds us all, is a common dedication to our Navy, our Marine Corps, our Coast Guard, and a common dedication to support and foster and steward our engineering community. And two, perhaps this morning, there's a bit of concern for the budget, what lies ahead, interest in the way ahead, and a desire to be a part of that future. So I'd like to talk about these things, and I'll start by talking about the future. Tonight, I'll be joining with a group that share the same values that we all have here, a group that represents the future. Alumni Hall at the Naval Academy will be hosting the Society of American Military Engineers annual dinner, a group of midshipmen and sponsors, some in uniform, some in industry, all getting together to honor the career fields these young men and women have chosen. I've been attending this event for the past 5 years at the Academy and on other campuses, and let me offer that these kids today, joining our Navy, are incredibly bright and very focused, and at a point in their life when they had many choices before themselves, and at a point in time when our nation has been at war, they chose to dedicate their talents to train as engineers and serve in our Navy. So tonight, I'll talk with them about the stuff of engineering and the defense of our country. I'll tell them how, in this past year alone, the U.S. Marine Corps would take the Joint Strike Fighter to sea. U.S. Marines and their UK counterparts would spend 4 glorious weeks conducting short takeoffs and vertical landings day and night on board the USS Wasp, testing both the aircraft and ship as they demonstrate the truly awesome capabilities of this 5th generation fighter. That the Navy's game-changing maritime patrol aircraft, the P-8A Poseidon, would conduct its first Harpoon's weapons test firing at sea before she headed off to deployment later in the year. And that the Navy would begin the latest chapter in unmanned aviation, beginning with first flight of the high-endurance maritime surveillance aircraft, Triton, followed shortly by the first trap and catapult on and off an aircraft carrier of the X-47B UCAS, the Unmanned Combat Air System, and more recently, the first flight of the MQ-8C, the upgraded fire scout that provides double the payload, double the range of our unmanned rotary aircraft today. And in a series of firsts, USS Lake Erie would knock out a medium-range ballistic missile target by firing on the remote track of a distant satellite. A few months later, she would take out a complex separating short-range ballistic missile, and in a third test, set the mark for the highest altitude intercept to date. In all, Aegis would go 5 for 5 against increasingly complex targets, increasing its lead and its reputation in ballistic missile defense. And most recently, the John Paul Jones, a ship that entered the fleet about the same time these midshipmen entered the world, would complete her midlife modernization, and this past week, JPJ would demonstrate the great leap forward provided by the latest Aegis baseline upgrade by simultaneously engaging inbound cruise and ballistic missile targets. Meanwhile, DG-1000 Advanced Gun System would go 9 for 9 in its test events, firing 155 rounds at ranges of 45 to greater than 60 nautical miles with a strike pattern unlike anything ever seen from the barrel of a gun. The Long-Range Anti-Ship Missile, or ASNE, would conduct its first air-launched demonstration striking a maritime target from a distance far beyond the reach of the weapons in our arsenal today. And the Littoral Combat Ship would successfully complete its mine countermeasure mission package development testing, and perhaps most significantly, in the first demonstration of the Navy's Integrated Fire Control Counter-Air from the Sea, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, patrolling the skies beyond San Clemente Island, would detect, track, and engage an airborne target launched from Point Magoo, transmitting target data to an Aegis cruiser operating distant off the coast, and she would use that target data beyond the reach of the cruiser spy radar, launching an SM-6, engaging the target at the full range of this newest missile in the Navy's inventory without ever tracking it on own ship's radar, without ever illuminating the ship's illuminators. All the while, in the world of shipbuilding, we had launched 3 first-of-class ships. The America, first new big-deck amphib design in near 3 decades, would not merely launch, but go to sea and complete builder's trials this past year. And a week apart, following 15 years of development, design, and construction of truly revolutionary propulsion, electrical, electronic, aviation, and combat systems, we had launched the first new design carrier since the Nimitz, Gerald R. Ford, and 2, the first new design destroyer since the Arleigh Burke, the Zumwalt, just a week apart. Meanwhile, the Spearhead, lead ship of the Joint High-Speed Vessel class, and Montford Point, lead ship of the Mobile Landing Platform class, would join the fleet. And we would lay the keel for the first afloat-forward staging base, the Chesty Puller. In total, 43 ships spanning 11 ship classes were under construction the past year across 9 shipyards and a greater number of radar houses, weapons factories, systems commands, warfare centers, and research labs stretching across the country, building the next Navy. And as we press on with designing the strategic deterrent submarine to replace the venerable Ohio class, as we press on with the Flight 3 DDG-51 destroyer, the LXR class of amphibious ships, the air and missile defense radar, the offensive anti-surface warfare missile, the Virginia payload module, the LCS surface-to-surface missile, the Trident II D5 life extension, the Block 3 shipboard electronic warfare system, directed energy. We press on with developing and designing the Navy after next, the Navy that these young midshipmen will one day command. And equally important, as we sustain an operational tempo that has kept near half the fleet underway each day, including about 100 ships deployed and 37,000 sailors and Marines deployed to every corner of the globe, we press on with maintaining, modernizing, and supporting today's Navy. Now, I doubt these young engineers and future naval officers have had much time to pay close attention to these milestones, but it's important for them to know that 2013 was a very good year for naval engineering. Of course, you couldn't always tell that in the building where I work, where for most, engineering is a line item in the budget, and where a good week is defined as ending up on a Friday where you started off on a Monday. So it's worth mentioning that I'll be back at Alumni Hall next week for an event more remindful of where I work than perhaps the engineering houses where you all work. Next week, the Academy will be hosting the Brigade Boxing Championships. 10 bouts, 3 rounds each. For every midshipman at tonight's engineering dinner, there'll be 10 at the boxing match. And for every 10 engineers at tonight's dinner, there'll be one in the boxing ring. He'll stand alone in that arena. He has trained, in certain cases, for years for this opportunity, and his success will depend entirely upon his training. He'll take hits and won't have to shake them off immediately. He won't have much time to think about his moves, and by the third round, those gloves will feel like they weigh 25 pounds at the end of his arms. But if he lets those gloves drop, he'll be put to the mat immediately. These are lifelong skills that a quarter century from now will prepare these young men and women to be fighters for a year like 2013 in the Pentagon. 2013 was a good year for naval engineering, but 2013 was an incredibly difficult year. From a 7 months long continuing resolution to sequestration to government furloughs, hiring and pay freezes, and ultimately a shutdown that would lead up to another continuing resolution. 2013 was an incredibly difficult year. In certain corners of the defense industry, uncertainty predominated as contracts were delayed or canceled, wreaking havoc on planning and workforce management and ultimately impacting cost and schedule. Meanwhile, witness upon witness before congressional committees and subcommittees were asked to provide compelling testimony in hopes of blunting the impact of sequestration as the Hill deliberated on the 2014 budget. Well, through all of that churn, let me offer a few observations. First, a topic close to this group, a topic of great importance to our Navy. Shipbuilding and modernization were well protected. Or to put it another way, in the endless boxing match that was 2013, the Navy never dropped its gloves. Despite the CR and sequestration, Secretary Mavis kept it simple. Execute the program of record. And so every ship planned for procurement by the Navy in 2013 was placed on contract. It was a matter of priority. What's more, despite a significant decrease to the Department of Defense budget, Congress issued a resounding statement regarding the importance of sea power to the nation's defense strategy by funding a significant increase to our ship programs in 2013 and 2014. Now let me offer a second observation. Our job is to be second to none, to be not merely the most capable, but the most capable wherever, whenever it matters. And the achievements of this past year come at the end of extraordinary technical challenges, challenges which require extraordinary skills, engineering and manufacturing skills, and two, constant investment. That's what it takes to be able to say that there is no other military on earth that can match the capability of our Navy and Marine Corps team today. And if you're paying attention, you're well aware that there's an increasingly capable threat out there looking for us to drop our gloves. So let me offer a third observation, or a series of observations regarding other Navy's capabilities and their skills and investment. 15 years ago, it could be said that the Chinese Navy could not find a U.S. carrier at sea. 7.5 years ago, it was reported that a Chinese Song-class submarine surfaced undetected within firing ranges of the USS Kitty Hawk. And in the years since, with investment in the military increasing at an unmatched rate of greater than 10% per year, China has held the world's attention with development of the Liuyang-2 destroyer equipped with an active phased array radar and long-range surface-to-surface missiles, the J-20 and J-31 fifth-generation fighter aircraft, a fleet of increasingly quiet diesel boats, an advanced nuclear attack submarine, a modern amphibious force, an anti-ship ballistic missile, an anti-satellite weapon, and most recently reports of high-altitude EMP weapons. And having completed construction of a former Russian carrier, the Chinese Navy has begun training for flight ops at sea and recently announced its plans to construct 4 blue water carriers. Over this same period of time, Chinese operations have extended to the Western IO, the Persian Gulf, the waters off Syria, ports in Pakistan, ports in the Philippines, in pursuit of international missions typically attributed to the U.S. Navy: maritime security, anti-piracy, humanitarian assistance, presence. More recently, with declaration of an air defense identification zone in the East China Sea, China has challenged the territorial rights of its neighboring countries. And this past Sunday, in the Sydney Morning Herald, a leading Australian newspaper, it would be reported 3 Chinese warships conducting combat simulations sailed through the Sunda Strait last week, turned east, passed by Christmas Island before skirting the southern edge of Java. Never before has a Chinese naval drill come so close to Australia. And then taking a page from First Sea Lord Sir Jackie Fisher, who a century ago described that the whole principle of naval fighting is to be free to go anywhere with every damn thing the Navy possesses. The reporter went on. A muscled-up Chinese military is going where it wants, when it wants, and defense planners should take note. For in the longer term, Australia's planning depends heavily on whether the U.S. can maintain its strategic pivot to Asia, given its fiscal problems. A sobering caution from our closest ally in the Pacific. And it shouldn't be lost in this group, that for every engineer graduating from a U.S. institution in 2014, 10 will graduate in China. So let me close with a final observation. Dating back to the close of the Second World War, the U.S., which had long been an isolationist country before the war, realized that it could never again rest in isolation, secure behind the 2 oceans that bound us. And 2, the nation realized that we could not afford to garrison a large force in hopes of securing the peace during the coming age of long-range weapons. And so, it would become our national policy to seek security through technological superiority. The superior quality of U.S. weapons would trump the greater number of weapons or larger armies that likely opponents were expected to deploy. In President Eisenhower's words, America should base our security upon military formations which make maximum use of science and technology in order to minimize numbers in men. This is the stuff of naval engineering. And this policy has held us in good stead for near 3/4 of a century. Today, however, arguably, it's being uniquely challenged. An incredible rate of rise in global technology, a peer, near peer, and in certain cases, irregular warfare competitors exploiting that technology, and the weight of a national debt crisis threatening to slow our growth. In meeting the challenge, there's no single, simple way ahead. As the acquisition guy, I'm compelled to talk about driving cost out of our warfare systems. Make every dollar count. That's absolutely essential. It's a must. And I look for my program managers, program executive officers, and 2, I look for industry to be relentless in the pursuit of affordability. In the budget and in the fleet, numbers count. My message to NAVSEA is every engineer has got to be a cost engineer. 2, as the acquisition guy, I'm concerned with the health of the industrial base, from TAC Air to combat vehicles to radar to solid rocket motors to shipbuilding to ship repair. The range and uncertainty in the budget is creating valleys in design and construction that place critical engineering and manufacturing skills and abilities at risk. And stemming these issues is going to require new energy and innovation on the part of the Department of Defense, on the part of Congress, and the part of industry. Take on these challenges to look at both how we buy, what we buy, and how we build what we build. And as the research and development guy, I'm very concerned that we maintain the appropriate balance between near-term and long-term readiness and capability. The long-term threat is rising at a greater rate, and if we're not careful, we'll lose that technological edge, that qualitative edge that we've held on to for so long regarding the superiority of our weapons. That's a shift this nation cannot afford. We've got to maintain an appropriate focus on R&D in our budget as our budget comes under pressure. And finally, as an engineer, I greatly appreciate the work of the American Society of Naval Engineers. Your outreach, your focus, your goals and objectives to strengthen our engineering community and support our Navy and Marine Corps and Coast Guard. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for the opportunity to join this morning. Congratulations to this year's award winners, and don't let your gloves drop. So with that, I'd like to use the remaining time and hear what's on your mind, what keeps you all up at night, and what I can do to help you all better succeed. Do we have rules? Oh, absolutely.
The floor is open for questions for Secretary Stackley.
You always have a question.
Good morning. How are you, Mr. Secretary?
First, I'd like to thank you for coming. We certainly appreciate you sharing your time with us. And I guess my comment is, in spite of all of those wonderful accomplishments that you've cited, and they really are truly impressive and wonderful, I'm really concerned as an engineer on two fronts. One is we just deployed a carrier task group for 9 months, and I'm wondering where that's going and how long we can expect the people that man those ships to tolerate that. And then the second part is we're in the mode of forward deploying ships, home porting them overseas, and I'm concerned that they will be properly maintained from an engineering point of view, because I understand we're not bringing them home. Thank you.
Okay. Those are two very good concerns. And let me offer that first, extended deployment lengths are going to become the normal. There was a day past when carrier 6-month deployment was a standard. We can't keep the carrier presence that's being demanded of our Navy at a 6-month rotation cycle. So we are stretching out the deployment lengths of the carriers. And that does bring challenges in terms of op tempo, PERS tempo, what that means for maintaining the readiness of the ships that are deployed, and also what that means to the sailors. I'm not going to tell you that's in my lane, but I will tell you that the CNO and fleet commanders are on top of that in terms of trying to balance this thing called the GIF map, which is demand from the COCOMs for the presence requirements from our ships and aircraft, and the readiness of those ships, and then the wear and tear on the sailors. And it's a tough balancing act. And today, we're sitting here at 286 ships. Today, we are a 10-carrier Navy, and today we are being stressed to meet those presence requirements, carriers and ships in total. And to do that, it does mean going beyond what was a standard 6 months. But that also means we have to ensure that O&M is fully funded. And I will tell you that as the budget comes forward in 2015, you will see O&M fully funded as it's been defined. But it also means that we cannot afford to have our ship count drop. I think Secretary Mavis is speaking tomorrow, and I won't get out in front of him, but he will talk about a increase in the size of our Navy, not a drop in the size of our Navy in the face of this budget. The other challenge in terms of forward deploying ships, if you want to get higher presence out of your ships, forward deploying them is a great way to do it. But it comes with its own challenges. So for example, Freedom was sent to Singapore, 8-month deployment. We learned a great deal about a one-of ship in a port that is not a heavy industrial port, and what it takes to sustain that so she can meet her operations. we've got a lot of work to do there. So we're sending destroyers to Rota. Rota is glad to accept them. They're doing everything that they can to support them. We look at Darwin as not so much a forward deployed base, but as a center for operations to support the Marines in the Pacific. You're going to see buildup in Guam, and we're going to see more ships located where we need them to support that balance of presence versus the force size that we've got. And we're going to have to stay on top of maintaining them, stay on top of the readiness, to stay on top of providing whether it's part support, training, material support overseas. It's a challenge, but that's where we are.
Morning. Sir, over the last 18 months or so, we've seen a significant tightening in the ability of the federal workforce to attend and participate in conferences such as these. Do you see any change in the philosophy up in the building that might recognize that we're losing a significant opportunity for our younger engineers, our younger policymakers, to interact with their mentors, the technical societies, to continue so we can balance that 1 in 10 graduation rate?
Yeah, I think what you're reflecting on is last year. Between the sequestration and continuing resolution, between the GSA and all that fallout, the pendulum swung pretty hard in one direction in terms of things like conferences and attendance at professional events like this. It's coming back to the middle. There is a lot more oversight in terms of participation at these events, but it is coming back to the middle. And I look at myself as an advocate to support these type of events, and I urge you all, if something is coming and you need some help, get it into my office, let me help. One key, though, is get out in front. Okay, a lot of pop-ups are showing up in terms of a week in advance, the Friday before a thing that's happening the next Monday. The system doesn't respond that quickly. So plan ahead. If you run into roadblocks, please lean on my organization to help you in that regard. Okay. That was a softball.
So good morning. Thank you. I wanted to talk about some of the metrics at a private or in a public shipyard that we look at is safety, quality, cost, and schedule. At a shipyard, we're able to provide for the skilled labor workforce a pretty robust apprenticeship program that provides them with a good training base and skill set and a standardization of tasks and skills, competencies that they had to accomplish. And they can transfer that pretty much across any of the shipyards. Has the Navy looked at the industrial base and being able to help, particularly like the smaller companies that have to share their workforce, and being able to standardize the competencies for those companies and being able to take the shipyard employees, the trade skills, and be able to transfer them to different areas, considering that we have to share that workload because we simply do not have the skilled workforce of a sufficient quantity to be able to handle the workload that we set to each shipyard.
Yeah, so let me first offer that our major shipbuilders have a pretty robust apprenticeship program of their own. And I think if you were to visit Newport News, Ingalls, Bath Iron Works, these hardcore shipbuilders that are well recognized have a pretty healthy apprenticeship program. The other thing we've seen is the two newer shipyards and our industrial base, Austell and Marinette Marine. They've brought on a pretty robust apprenticeship training program with a lot of assistance from the state. And that said, your question was, have we looked at linking up public shipyard training programs with the private side to strengthen the total? I don't know that we have, and so I'll take that aboard. I'll talk with Admiral Hilardi's, see what's out there, see what makes sense, and particularly as you get down into some of the smaller shipyards, the ebb and flow of the workforce and the skill levels do become a bit more fragile, and I don't have good insight to what it looks like there. So I appreciate your question. I'll follow up with NAVSEA.
Daly, I'm with the Software Engineering Institute. You talked this morning about the emerging threats and the expanding physical presence in the Pacific mostly. I wonder if you could offer your perspectives on cyber security and warfare, offensive and defensive.
Yeah, I didn't hit on cyber. We are today at war in cyber. Okay, that should be very plain to folks. If you run down the list of the Chinese developments over the last 5 to 10 years, and you take a close look at a lot of their designs, they look a hell of a lot like our designs. The exfiltration of our technical data is, one, it's extraordinary, and two, it should be keeping people up at night. One of the tough challenges that we've got right now is our industry, government and industry. We're tied together in a very non-secure fashion. We're a very open society, and we have a lot of data flowing across the internet, and it is vulnerable. And it's being exploited. It's being exploited very regularly. And so as we become more aware of the extent, as we become more aware of the vulnerabilities, we also become more aware of the size of the problem that we've got before us in terms of stopping the erosion. Because the fact is that we used to have a 2-generation lead on our competitors in terms of technology. Now it's less than a generation lead. The rate at which they're climbing is not just about how hard they're working at it. It's also about how well they're able to exfiltrate and exploit our technical data. If you're on the industry side, you should be concerned for business reasons. But more importantly, on the national security side, we've lost a lot of the ground that we once held. And the solution is tough. It's very tough. And I will tell you that this rises, in my mind, to the need for a national task force. We just haven't gotten there yet. Today, we're defining the problem. If left to, I'm afraid that if left to the Pentagon, the solution will be policy-minded. And I think what we need is something much harder than a policy when it comes to dealing with that part of the cyber threat. And that's just dealing with, call it phase 0, pre-phase 0 activities in cyber. The other great reality is in a kinetic war, our systems very much rely on the net. I described NIFCA. NIFCA is a bunch of platforms that are talking to each other in order to put ordnance on target. You look at our precision-guided munitions. There are vulnerabilities there that we've got to protect. And the reality is that the threat today is more focused on identifying our vulnerabilities and going after those as opposed to trying to go head-to-head with our force. Very real, very high priority across the Department of Defense. It is an increasing threat, and we're not in front of it yet. This has been a sobering discussion, which really wasn't my intent. But you know, I want to get a couple of points across. First, we have incredible capability out there. We have fantastic capability that we're putting in the hands of our sailors and Marines to go to war, to win the war, and to come home safe. Incredible capability. But there is a rising threat out there. And that rising threat appears to have a long-term strategy, although the reality is it's not clear what that strategy is to us. So we have to be very concerned, and they're starting to flex their muscle in the region, and so we have to be concerned. You know, the policy of the United States, if I were a policy guy, I would tell you that the policy of the United States is not to go to war with China. But our friends, our allies in the region, a region that's extremely important to us economically and from a national security standpoint, they're facing new challenges, and we've got to pay close attention to that. So at a period of time when we're under great budget pressure, downward pressure, that's stressing everything from our operations and maintenance account, our procurements, our investment in R&D, this competitor is on the rise. And the solution banking on what we've relied on for the last 3/4 century is folks like you ensuring that we hold on to the technological edge that we've had since World War II. It's tough. And there are going to be tough choices. The budget's going to expose some of those tough choices, and we're going to be duking it out. This is not a 3-round bout we're fighting. We're going to be duking it out year by year to hold on to what we need as a nation to provide us security. And there's going to be a lot of debate over what's the greater threat. Is the greater threat outside of our borders, or is the greater threat our national debt? And how do we balance the two? So it's, if you're an engineer out there in support of our Navy and Marine Corps, I fall back on my first priority, which is get your costs down, deliver your products, get your ships out there on schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll continue to hammer you all individually and in groups every opportunity I get. But two, we're a small percent of the American public population. And we have a very keen awareness of what our national security requirements are, what those threats are, and what needs to be done to keep our lead. We've got to be a voice, be a common voice inside of the Department of Defense, with the Congress, with industry, to help to shape what those future budgets will be to our needs. I described the 13 and 14 budget. Congress showed great favor to the Navy in the 13 and the 14 budget. Total budgets came down? Yes. How did the Navy fare? Very well, all things considered. There's a recognition out there of our mission, our responsibilities by the Congress, and our part of the deal is to make sure that the things that we're responsible for delivering, we're delivering them on time, making every dollar count, making the taxpayer, being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. I don't want to preach. Other questions?
Just one last question, sir. You've talked about affordability, and I've listened to you talk about affordability now for a couple of years, and it's a great thing. We should make our dollars count, and we need to. However, you also talked about a technological superiority and a need to reduce the manpower end of things. In a traditional sense, those two, affordability and increasing technology, aren't necessarily aligned. So higher technology on the front end requires more engineering, which generally requires greater funding. In the past, and history has shown that government in general has tended to favor lower cost acquisition over acquisitions that may have a total life cycle cost that is less than that other system. The acquisition community hasn't in the past necessarily had the tools to make that evaluation and move forward with that strategy. There have been some rudimentary tools in the past several years that have been developed, but can you talk a little bit more about affordability in the long term and what types of things the acquisition community can be expecting in the future?
Okay. Let me first start. Affordability is, maybe it's a relative term, okay? If you're developing, building, and fielding the most technologically advanced weapon system, whatever it is, it might be the offensive anti-surface warfare missile, it might be the U-class, the things that we are today developing, you start with the requirement. all starts with the requirement. Once you nail down the requirement, then affordability gets wrapped around that. What's the most affordable way to develop, build, field, test, et cetera? The particular issue that you're getting at there, which is near-term, long-term, traditionally, when we're out there, whether it's a ship or aircraft, what have you, and you're making cost trades, traditionally, a program manager has been focused on, well, what do I have to deliver today? What are my requirements to deliver the thing today? And if there's a trade between the life cycle cost, something that will come back to bite us 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and getting the thing delivered within his budget today, the tendency, probably 99 times out of 100, has been to deal with today's budget issue, deliver in accordance with today's requirements, and worry about that tail later. This came up, frankly, an exchange I had with the CNO probably 3 or 4 months ago, where there was a particular issue, and he raised the question. And when you get down to it, we do not have, other than a generic, global, high-level, consider the ownership cost when you're procuring the thing. We, in fact, do not have rules, guidelines, guidance, restrictions, anything to tell the program manager where do you make those trades, nor the resource sponsor. And so what I proposed to him was, we got to build that rule set. We've got to, when we're setting the requirement, we have to decide what is the requirement in terms of ownership cost, rather than less is better. And then we have to determine how much you have to invest to hit those ownership cost targets, whether it's a material selection, whether it's automation, what is the thing that's going to drive down the ownership cost that we're willing to invest in, make that a part of the program, and hold the program manager accountable for delivering that with his system. And it's difficult. It's difficult because that building, long-term planning, is the end of the fit-up. That's the long term. And to get folks to pay attention to a bill that's beyond the fit-up is very difficult. Everyone will pay homage to it, but no one will pay for it. And so I can only offer that we're going about it. Frankly, we're starting with ships. I think everyone here knows Allison Stiller. This has landed in Allison's lap. She's working with NAVC, Admiral Carney, who's been given particular assignments working for Admiral Hilardes, and we're going at it. I'm going to keep on returning to that boxing match, okay? You stay in that ring, and you keep slugging away. You don't drop your gloves, doesn't matter how tired you are. We're going to keep swinging away at this, and we'll see where we get. Please.
Offer that as a member of industry, I think in general, industry appreciates that you're having that conversation moving forward, and we will certainly look forward to hearing more about it in the future as you develop that strategy.
I don't think it's going to be a far future, okay? I saw Brian Kush's here, I see Mitch here. We've already started engaging with certain elements of industry on this particularly, and we'll broaden that approach, okay? All right, well, look.